I have always been a dedicated mother, taking care of my son Lucas, who was 5 years old at the time. We lived in a simple but cozy house in the suburbs. The house was inherited from my parents, who had bought it when they were young. It was a quiet place, where the routine of the people around seemed to drag slowly, with very little movement on the streets. Even though I was a single mother, I always tried to raise Lucas in a safe and happy environment, away from the hustle and bustle of the big city. We were very excited for Christmas, as it would be the first one where Lucas would truly understand the meaning of the holiday. It was Christmas Eve when I decided to go to the shopping center to buy the last-minute presents and get out of the routine for a while. We had already bought gifts for the family, but I still needed a special present for Lucas. I decided to go to a toy store that I knew he loved. I spent the day with Lucas in a cheerful and relaxed mood, and after finishing the shopping, I decided to stop by a fast food restaurant so he could have a snack and we could relax a bit before heading home. As we were leaving the shopping center through the side exit, something caught my attention. On the sidewalk there was a man dressed as Santa Claus. He was standing in front of the toy store, smiling and greeting people as if he were part of some Christmas promotion. It was common to see this kind of Santa Claus at shopping centers, and he seemed to be there just to create a festive atmosphere. He saw us, waved and approached, stopping to talk to Lucas. With that warm smile, he crouched down and asked what Lucas wanted for Christmas. I was surprised when Lucas replied without hesitation, "I want a video game." Curiously, it was exactly what I had planned to buy him, and I even felt more excited to see that he was so clear about what he wanted. Santa smiled and looking at me said, "If you're good, maybe you'll get what you want." He winked at me and for a moment, everything seemed normal. We continued talking for a few more minutes. Santa started to exaggerate his compliments, saying that I was too beautiful to be the mother of such a smart boy. Lucas laughed, not understanding what he was saying, and I just smiled back, trying to keep the conversation light. When we said goodbye, he made one last joke. "Be careful, Mom, you never know who's watching you, even Santa Claus." I thought he was just joking, and with that, we left, not paying much attention to his comment. But it was exactly that comment that made me remember him later. The next morning, after spending the night with the feeling that nothing unusual had happened, I still couldn't get the encounter with Santa out of my head. Something about that man bothered me deeply, but I tried not to pay too much attention to the uneasy feeling. He was just a man dressed as Santa, right? Still, a strange sensation settled in my stomach. As I was getting ready to leave the house to do some last-minute shopping, the doorbell rang again. The sound of the doorbell made me freeze. The clock showed that it was already late and I wasn't expecting anyone. With my heart racing, I went to the door and looked through the peephole. There he was again, the man from yesterday wearing the same red suit. He was standing in front of my door, smiling at me. My mind went into panic. How did he know where I lived? How did he get there so quickly? My first impulse was not to open the door, but I felt compelled to confront him. I took a deep breath and with a firm voice asked through the door, "What do you want? If you're the Santa from the shopping center, go away now. I'm not interested in talking." He didn't respond immediately, but I could still hear him on the other side of the door, murmuring something I couldn't understand. My heart was pounding and I felt a wave of panic rise. Then he spoke again, his voice now softer. "I know you heard me yesterday, and I just wanted to return something you dropped. If you open the door, I can explain everything." I looked at Lucas, who was playing in the living room, unaware of the growing tension. For a moment, the man seemed harmless, as if he was just trying to be kind. But something in the tone of his voice wasn't right. He wasn't the friendly Santa who had approached Lucas at the shopping center. There was something sinister about him. I decided it was time to call the police. I grabbed my phone and, with a trembling voice, called emergency services. I quickly explained that a man was at my door, posing as Santa, and that I felt in danger. The operator advised me not to open the door and to wait for the police to arrive. I then went back to Lucas and we locked all the doors and windows of the house, sitting together on the couch as the tension filled the air. The doorbell rang again, and this time I knew it was no coincidence. He was trying to intimidate me. I could hear his low, dragging voice through the door. "I know where you live. I just wanted to be kind, but if you don't let me in, I'll have to make you listen in another wage." It was at that moment that the sense of danger truly settled in. I could no longer ignore what was happening. It wasn't just a man dressed as Santa Claus. It was clear he had been following me and knew more about my life than he should have. I looked through the kitchen window but saw no one, only the darkness of the night. The police arrived about 20 minutes later, an eternity to me. The officer asked if I knew who the man was or had any idea of what he wanted. I showed them the note I had found on the door the day before, and the officer reassured me that they were taking action. The man had been identified by security cameras at the shopping mall, but no one knew how he had tracked down my address. The following nights were the longest of my life. Every time the doorbell rang, I shrank in fear. I didn't dare open the door, not even for deliveries. The streets were quiet, but my sense of alertness had never been sharper. I avoided leaving the house, fearing he might be watching me, always lurking, waiting for the right moment to make his next move. Every noise at night seemed amplified, and the silence of the house became unbearable. I couldn't sleep. Fear was constant and anxiety took over. However, life had to continue. I still had a son to take care of, and Lucas was starting to notice something was wrong. When he asked what was going on, I simply told him it was something at work that had me worried without going into details. But he knew. Children always know. There was something in the air, something that made us feel unsafe, and he felt it intensely. One night, about a week after the last note, the doorbell rang again. But this time it wasn't just a ring. It was a soft knock, almost as if someone were trying to be discreet, but with an urgency behind it. I was in the kitchen, eyes fixed on the window, trying to see if anyone was out there. Nothing. The silence of the night was absolute. I hesitated, but then something urged me to go to the door without opening the curtain, to see who was on the other side. My heart racing, I went to the peephole. There was no one there. The emptiness of the street felt even more unsettling than before. But then I noticed something different. A small box was carefully placed on the ground in front of my door. Trembling, I opened the door just enough to grab the box. It was taped shut, and when I held it, I could feel something inside, but I didn't know what. I placed it on the kitchen table, and with shaking hands, I began to cut the tape. Inside, there was an envelope with a letter. I opened the envelope and read, "I see everything you do. I know when you're home and when you're not. I know you're afraid of me, but that's how it should be. Christmas was just the beginning. I can't wait any longer for us to be together, and when that happens, you will understand. You and Lucas are all I need. You can't escape me now. I'm already in your life forever. Ted." My hands began to sweat. Panic flooded me again. He was in my life even more deeply now that he knew where I lived. But what disturbed me the most was the feeling that he knew much more than I imagined. He had been watching, even during our most intimate moments, as if he had access to everything. Nervous and panicking, I decided to do something I didn't want to do, but that seemed like the only option. I was going to move. I could no longer live with this constant fear. But before I could organize everything, something happened. The next morning, the police showed up at my house. I went to the door, surprised and confused. One of the officers looked at me with a serious expression and told me there was an update on the case. He entered the living room and handed me a piece of paper. It was a photo of Ted. "This is the man who was posing as Santa Claus, right?" the officer asked. "Yes," I confirmed, but my stomach twisted. The photo showed the man, but something was wrong. He looked different, older and more familiar. Something in his expression made me freeze. The officer noticed my reaction and asked if I was okay. You don't understand. He's watching me. He knows everything about me, about my life. I can't live like this anymore," I said, my voice trembling. The officer looked at the photo again and furrowed his brow. "This man is not who you think. Ted isn't a stranger. He is..." But before he could finish the sentence, I heard a noise from inside the house. The kitchen door was slightly open and a figure was standing there. A gray-haired man, thin with empty eyes, slowly entered the room. It was my father. He looked at me with a distant expression, almost as if he didn't recognize me. "You don't understand. I had to do this. We can't let you escape. We can't let what we are, escape." He moved toward me with slow steps as if in a trance, and then everything made sense. Ted wasn't a stranger. He was my own father. After years of being absent from my life, he reappeared, hiding behind the facade of Santa Claus, and had been manipulating me all along. The box, the notes, everything was part of his plan. He had been watching my life and now, finally, had found me. I didn't know whether I was relieved or horrified. The police were in shock. My father, the man I thought had disappeared, was standing right in front of me, and all he wanted was to take me back into his world of obsession. The officer tried to protect me, but before he could do anything, my father turned to him and said, "She's mine, and you will never have her back." Suddenly, the kitchen light flickered, and the house went into complete darkness. The sound of muffled laughter echoed through the walls. I knew at that moment that the real Christmas would never end, not for me.